Joan by Carol M Mottershead. Chapter 17. Date 1st of September 1979. Dear Diary, it's been a very busy summer, but I did promise Dr. Goodwin I would finish our agreed number of sessions, so I've booked our final appointment for tomorrow. I don't know if this regression therapy has been a good idea. It's felt like I've opened a can of worms, and my mind doesn't want to let them all out at once. These obsessions are part of my memory, according to Dr. Goodwin. He says my subconscious is remembering an emotion linked with the memory, and they're playing out as obsessions. Obsessions about closing windows, checking they're definitely shut tight, putting knives away, and even this anger at Mr. Punch. Where did that come from? I've always loved my puppet shows. They've always helped me in the past. It's like they're trying to tell me something, but I'm not understanding what they're trying to say. Dr. Goodwin sent me his tape as promised to help me with my new obsessional behaviour. At least now I can go to bed or leave the house without having to check all the windows so much anyway. And at least I'm now able to work again without actually wanting to throttle Mr. Punch, which is an improvement. I just want tomorrow now to be over. Dr. Goodwin's office, Session 10, 2nd of September 1979. Transcript of session. I'd seen those eyes every day for years. Happy, sad, even angry. But never have I seen them as they were on that poster. There are no words to describe the way they looked. Staring, calm, resigned, accepting. There was almost a Mona Lisa-like smile about his face, a sense of peace. Whose eyes are there, Joan? Pulcinella's. My husband's. Why was he on the poster? We'd always wanted lots of children, you know. We used to argue about it. It was a touchy subject for both of us. It wasn't for the lack of trying, especially in the beginning, but we were never blessed with any further offspring after Nicholas. I guess it wasn't meant to be. Sometimes the men would brag about how many children they'd fathered, with or sometimes without their wives' knowledge. If you know what I mean, they'd tease their wives. Pulcinella would remind them of just how costly those children were, and if we, the wives, were present, he'd grab me, give me one of those loud, sloppy stage kisses on the cheek, followed by one of his cheeky grins and a wink, and I would playfully slap his face. After all, I was a lady. Despite his bravado publicly, privately things weren't so funny. Pulcinella would blame me for not having more children, as if it was my fault. I'd always wanted lots of children. We both did. We both, too, knew how lonely life could be as an only child. Things weren't as lovey-dovey as he would have everyone believe. He'd accuse me for not giving him more children. I'd blame him for not having been home long enough to do his duty. And he'd blame me for nagging him, and we'd go round and round in circles, hurting each other. I even once told him to take another woman if he only wanted a baby-making machine. Joan, the poster, what was written on the poster? Performing was the one thing that pulled our family together. We all loved our work. The thrill of the applause, the excitement of performing a new play. We could totally absorb ourselves in our shows. What shows were these, Joan? Your puppet shows? No. We were known as Commedia dell'arte. Commedia dell'arte? Yes. We've travelled all over Europe. We were very popular. Tell me more about Commedia dell'arte, Joan. When was this? We were safe in Italy, amongst our own countrymen. They loved our outrageous performances, especially when we portrayed the foppish French aristocrats and their philandering concubines. If it wasn't for that vertically challenged Napoleon and his nest of spies, we would probably have stayed there. But villagers had started wearing masks like ours and were acting like hooligans, throwing rotten vegetables and fruits and things at his soldiers as they invaded our country. The upshot was that we were banned from our own country. He did us a favour in the end, for his own countrymen adored us. That's when Pulcinella started drinking again. He could afford it, you see. He liked the taste, he would say, whenever I challenged him on it. But wine makes fools of us. Beer causes fights, and overindulging in it's neither as wise for any man. And I didn't want Nicholas to see his father making such a fool of himself. Joan, I'd like to move forward. Tell me about the eyes you saw on that poster. It was the headline that caught my attention first. What was the headline? Heads roll for the last time in France. Joan, why does the headline worry you? Client woke up. It was the end of session. See case notes. Case notes, session 10, 2nd of September 1979. It's been 8 weeks since I last saw Joan. When she first came to me, she was anxious about recovering her lost memory, but that anxiety has lessened. In today's session, she showed classic signs of avoidance of that memory. She would change the subject every time. I was mindful of that time. It was our last session, and I wanted to push her as far as possible one more time. I had to interrupt her stories which, although highlighting further issues in her life, they were not answering my questions. The session ended abruptly as before, her eyes opening, but she was so close this time. So close. I hated ending our session, but it was definite she wasn't prepared to take that extra step with me. I took her back into a relaxation and brought her safely back to full awakening consciousness. We discussed what she had revealed about her issues with childlessness, about Commedia dell'arte, and especially about the poster, the eyes, the news headlines. She appeared embarrassed to talk further on any of the subjects. She now says she feels her memory will reveal itself in its own good time, and does not wish to pursue our course further in that respect. As for the obsessions that she told me of, they too seem to be lessening. Despite no resolution to our sessions, she has made good progress overall. I have warned her that she may experience a revelation when her memory does return, and if she feels the need to see me again, if and when that happens, I will be only a phone call away. Our sessions are over, but my curiosity has piqued regarding her past life with Commedia dell'arte. It would be interesting to prove if there is any truth to the historic facts she mentioned. She mentioned being ordered out of Italy by Napoleon and his spies. Many clients' past lives were unable to be verified, but with so much detail, I might bring her back as part of my research into past lives. A visit to the library may be able to validate some of what she mentions. I'm quite excited at a new case to look into. I'll have to speak with Dr. Doyle, head of our institute. She may have come across a pulsnella that was mentioned. It's not a name you hear every day, although I think I may have heard of a restaurant called Pulsnella, but that's all. Date 2nd of September 1979. Dear Diary, what the heck happened today? I've not talked so freely to anybody, hypnosis or otherwise, since Scaramouche. Telling him about Commedia dell'arte and Napoleon. Was I mad? He probably thinks I'm going out of my mind. First the obsessions, then the anger at a puppet. Now talk about Commedia dell'arte. Mind you, I do feel a sense of relief. Does that seem silly? I can still see Pulsnella's eyes, lost and forlorn. And those headlines. Heads to roll in France for the last time or something, wasn't it? What date would that be from, I wonder? Maybe someone at the library will be able to dig out the news article for me. I feel exhausted, emotionally and physically. Alison is visiting tomorrow. If I remember, I'll ring the library in the morning. They may have back issues on microfiche. Alison might pop in and pick any copies they have if I call them early enough. Now that I've had time to think about it, Dr. Goodwin deals with past life regressions. Maybe he'll just think I've gone so far back in time that I was talking about a past life. I hope so, at least. I have to admit, it felt good to finally talk about Nicholas and Pulsnella with someone. I'm tired of having no one to talk to. Alison is a lovely woman. I know she would do anything she could to help me, but I couldn't tell her about my immortality. Oh, Nicholas. If you're out there, please find me. We used to be so close that I could call you for your meal times just by thinking of you and calling your name. Where are you now? I can sense you're near. I woke the next morning with thoughts of yesterday still going round in my mind. As I washed and brushed my teeth, I found myself talking to myself. I wonder, I said. A lot of heads did roll during the French Revolution. I wonder if that's one of the reasons for my obsession with knives. I wonder if that's why I mentioned Napoleon yesterday. Could it be my mind is remembering the French Revolution? But why now? It's not like I have any reason to be scared of being captured and losing my head. Thoughts kept running through my mind. I remembered the French Revolution was hard on Pulsnella. He became obsessed over our safety during that time. The Republicans had risen up against their monarchy. Noble men and women from all over France were being beheaded with a newfangled steel-bladed machine they called a guillotine. we would gather notices and charters from the townships and take news of the revolution to the outlying villages, occasionally helping an aristocrat escape under the very noses of a revolutionary by dressing them as a masked, bumbling, foppish aristocrat, or a simple-minded political figure under the guise of a working actor. Nothing would seem out of place, and a bumbling fop was just that, foppish. Our art was risky. Creating caricatures of people whilst mocking authority was risky, but it's what we did. The occasions we did have to go into towns for food and stuffs was scary. We could see rows of headless, bloodied corpses lined up along the scaffold, waiting to be taken away, heads in baskets below with horrified faces, eyes filled with fear. We heard also that rewards were being offered for disclosing the whereabouts of anyone born of noble birth. Countrymen, servants, even those that were considered friends, could no longer be trusted. Betrayals were countrywide, with calls of Vive la France sounding out everywhere, and crowds baying for blood. They say count your blessings when life gets tough. And I was thankful for one thing. With Pulsnella's anxiety for our safety being what it was, it brought out his protectiveness for us. He took responsibility for once, something he was well known to avoid. He stopped drinking too. We had to be alert, he told us. Our lives were at stake, he kept reminding us, and we needed each other, more so now than ever before. His paranoia got so bad that not only strangers who knocked at our door took the chance of being attacked, but even our once trusted friends were afraid to interrupt him at home. Could they betray us? Would they betray us, Joan? He asked me one anxious night. After all, Joan, if you were to be captured, or Nicholas, the rewards on you two alone would pay for a family's food for a week or more. I couldn't bear to lose you, either of you. You are all that makes this life worth living. Fortunately or unfortunately, Pulsnella became acquainted with a nobleman called Denetian. Denetian fancied himself a bit of an author, and he wanted our troupe to perform one of his plays, but they were horrid, most distasteful, filled with the most crude sexual behaviour and debauchery. Many of our own plays were political, with absurd observations filled with humour and sexual innuendos, but not like his, not disgusting, immoral and downright filth. I didn't care to get to know him. So what if he had a fancy French title? I blame him for encouraging Pulsnella to drink once again, as well as take drugs. He was a vile man. Pulsnella drunkenly told him one night how much I disliked him, and he tried justifying himself to me by explaining to Pulsnella what he, Denetian, had the king's ear, and that he was a good friend of King Louis. He claimed he wrote his style of writings not for himself, for he was a happily married man with a kind and loving wife, but for His Majesty, to entertain the king. Everyone believes that I write the way I live, but seriously, you tell your wife, Joan, does she think my wife could stand by and love me the way she does if that was how I treated her in my own life? I'm a politician, dear lady. I give people what they want. I'm a philosopher, writer, and a gentleman, he said. I refused to answer when Pulsnella told me. I wasn't sure what to think of that after that. I just know that his form of writing, filled with such diabolical and disgusting stories, was not what one would expect of a gentle man, and certainly not what I would call entertainment. Pulcinella's acquaintance with Donetian caused a state of disagreement between Pulcinella and I. His reputation is not that of a noble man. He is loathsome, I said to Pulcinella one day. I don't like to gossip, as you know, Pulcinella. But what people say about this Donetian, he lives a life of debauchery and has absolutely no morals whatsoever. He is a disgraceful man. Pulcinella defended his new acquaintance. He was potentially a benefactor to our troop. Benefactors come in many forms, Joan, you know that. He has contacts and knows people in positions of power. We can't let personalities get in the way of business, he'd say. In his defence, Joan, he does understand what it is to live for the day, like we have to. He feels no guilt or shame about anything. I have lived with so much guilt and shame over what I have done. But Donetian, he has no fear of judgment from a god like I do. I admire his philosophy. I once heard him say, before we were born, we are nothing more than an indistinguishable lump of unformed matter. After death we simply return to that nebulous state. We will become the raw material out of which new beings are fashioned. Will there be pain in this natural process? No. Pleasure? No. Now, is there anything frightening in this? Certainly not. And yet people sacrifice pleasure on earth in the hope that pain will be avoided in an afterlife. The fools don't realise that, after death, pain and pleasure cannot exist. There is only the sensationless state of cosmic anonymity. Therefore the rule of life should be to enjoy oneself. I would love to be able to think and feel as he does, Joan. Will we ever have a release from this life? I don't know if I can live feeling like this forever, in constant fear. There are days that I feel happy. My times with you, my love, and with Nicholas, when we can be alone as a family, together, even for a few days. But the world out there right now is a harsh place to be, Joan. We need to get away. It won't be long before the Republicans capture the king. Even Donetian will be in danger. They're going to behead all aristocrats, Joan. I couldn't bear to be without you. Donetian has a good philosophy of how to enjoy life, but I don't agree with his attitude towards women. He's got a cruel streak, Joan. And I love you. I always have. You were the only woman who has ever loved me, even after Scaramouche. And he broke down crying as he remembered how he bludgeoned his friend to death in cold blood. It was the first time Pulcinella ever truly opened up to me. I may not believe totally in a god, but I do believe that things good and bad happen for a reason. And Donetian had made Pulcinella think of his future, our family's future, at least this once. I have blamed Donetian for getting Pulcinella hooked on drugs and alcohol again many times, but one thing I owe him is our lives. For when Pulcinella asked him to help us get out of France, he did direct us to someone who could help us escape.